The transport shuttle docked with the research vessel Starbound Horizon with a soft thud that echoed through the metal corridors. Katie Morgan stepped off the shuttle, her worn boots making quiet sounds on the polished floor. She carried a single bag over her shoulder and looked around at the gleaming walls and advanced technology that surrounded her. The docking bay was huge compared to anything she had seen before. Lights ran along the ceiling in patterns that seemed to pulse with their own life. The air smelled clean and filtered, nothing like the recycled atmosphere of the mining stations where she had grown up. Captain Zextar waited for her near the main entrance. He was tall and covered in dark green scales that caught the light. His yellow eyes looked her up and down with obvious displeasure. Behind him stood 3 other crew members, each from a different alien species. "So you are the human," Captain Zextar said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "The Galactic Council has decided we need your kind on our research missions. I do not agree with this decision." Katie nodded and kept her face calm. She had expected this reaction. Most aliens thought humans were too dangerous or too stupid to work alongside civilized species. "I am Katie Morgan, sir. I am here to help with whatever you need." The Zalani standing next to the captain stepped forward. Her name was Zalana, and she was the ship's chief engineer. She was almost 7 feet tall with pale blue skin that seemed to shine like crystal. Her movements were graceful and smooth, like she was dancing even while standing still. "Welcome aboard," Zalana said, though her tone suggested she was just being polite. "I hope you will not cause too much trouble while you are here." The small gray alien beside her made a sound that might have been laughter. This was Dr. Velthos, a Karathi who served as the ship's science officer. His head was twice the size of a human head, and his large black eyes seemed to take in everything at once. "Humans come from what they call a deathworld," Dr. Velthos said to the others, ignoring Katie completely. "Their planet is so dangerous that they developed paranoid behavior patterns. They see threats everywhere, even when none exist." The 4th alien, Security Chief Bractor, was another Vexan like the captain. He was even larger than Zextar, with scars running across his scaled face. "At least they know how to fight," he said, "though I doubt this small one could handle real combat." Katie listened to them talk about her as if she was not standing right there. She had dealt with this kind of treatment before. Growing up on the mining stations, she had learned to keep quiet and prove herself through actions rather than words. Captain Zextar led them through the ship's corridors. The walls were lined with screens showing data streams and star charts. Everything was clean and organized in a way that spoke of advanced technology and careful planning. "You will be assigned to general duties," the captain told Katie as they walked. "Cleaning, maintenance, simple tasks. Do not touch anything important without permission." They passed through several sections of the ship. Katie noticed things that the others seemed to miss. A support beam that showed stress marks, a ventilation grate that was not properly secured, a gravity generator housing that had a small crack in its casing. "Captain," Katie said quietly, "that gravity generator looks like it might need attention." Captain Zextar stopped and looked where she was pointing. "The generator was inspected last month. It is functioning perfectly." "Yes, sir, but there is a hairline crack in the housing. On the mining stations, we learned that even small cracks can become big problems if the pressure changes suddenly." Dr. Velthos made that sound again. "Humans always think they see problems where none exist. Their primitive technology requires constant maintenance, so they assume all technology is unreliable." Zalana examined the generator with a scanner from her belt. "All readings are normal. The housing is made of quantum-bonded alloy. It cannot crack under normal circumstances." Katie wanted to point out that the crack was visible to the naked eye, but she could see that arguing would only make things worse. She nodded and followed them to her quarters. Her room was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a small storage area, and a window that looked out into space. Katie set her bag down and looked around. The room had everything she needed, though it felt sterile compared to the cramped but lived-in spaces she was used to. Over the next few days, Katie tried to settle into life aboard the ship. She was given simple tasks like organizing supply inventories and cleaning common areas. The work was easy, but she felt like she was being watched all the time. The crew treated her like a curiosity at best and a burden at worst. During meals in the common area, conversations would stop when she entered. When she tried to ask questions about their research or offer suggestions, she was politely but firmly dismissed. Katie noticed more things that worried her. The emergency protocols were outdated. The backup life support systems had not been tested in months. The ship's course was taking them close to an unstable nebula that showed signs of dangerous energy fluctuations. She tried to bring these concerns to the attention of the senior officers. Each time she was told that her worries were unfounded and that the ship's systems were far more advanced than anything she was used to. Your species evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill you, Dr. Velthos explained to her one day in the laboratory. This has made you see danger where none exists. It is a primitive survival mechanism that has no place on a modern starship. Solana agreed. Human technology is crude and unreliable. That is why humans think all technology will fail. Our ships are built to last for centuries without major repairs. Katie knew they were wrong, but she also knew that pushing the issue would only make them more convinced that she was being paranoid. Instead, she began quietly making her own preparations. She studied the ship's layout and learned where all the emergency supplies were stored. She made note of which systems had backup power and which did not. When she was off duty, Katie exercised in the cargo bay. She practiced movements and techniques her uncle had taught her back on the mining station. He had been a security officer who believed that everyone should know how to defend themselves. The alien crew members sometimes watched her exercise. They seemed amused by her efforts, as if watching a child play at being a warrior. Katie ignored their looks and continued her preparations. She had learned long ago that the universe was full of dangers that most people preferred not to think about. The crew of the Starbound Horizon might be more advanced than humans in many ways, but they had never learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes being paranoid was the only thing that kept you alive. 3 weeks after Katie joined the crew, the Starbound Horizon arrived at Kepler 442c, an uninhabited planet that the Galactic Survey had marked for research. The world was covered in dense forests and had a breathable atmosphere. Initial scans showed rich mineral deposits and no signs of intelligent life. Katie stood in the observation deck and looked down at the planet's surface. Something about it made her uncomfortable, though she could not put her finger on exactly what. The forests looked too uniform, too organized. There were patterns in the vegetation that reminded her of the defensive perimeters around the mining stations. Beautiful world, Dr. Velthos said as he joined her at the window. Perfect for establishing a research base. The soil samples will tell us much about planetary formation in this region. Have you done detailed scans for animal life? Katie asked. Of course. Our sensors detected various small creatures. Nothing larger than what you humans would call a rabbit. Perfectly harmless herbivores. The Karathi's large eyes reflected the planet's green surface. Why do you ask? Katie pointed to a section of forest near where they planned to land. Those clearings looked deliberate, like something large made them. And see how the trees grow in clusters? That is usually a sign that animals use the spaces between them as travel routes. Dr. Velthos looked where she was pointing and shrugged. You see patterns that do not exist. Natural clearings are common on worlds with volcanic activity. The tree clusters are probably the result of wind dispersal of seeds. Captain Zextar's voice came over the ship's communication system. All research teams to the shuttle bay. We will establish base camp within the hour. The shuttle landed in a wide clearing near a river. The air was warm and humid, filled with the sounds of insects and distant bird calls. Katie helped unload equipment while the scientists set up their instruments and temporary shelters. The base camp was positioned exactly where Katie would have told them not to put it. They were in a natural bottleneck between two ridges with only one clear exit route. The river cut off their retreat in one direction. Tall grass surrounded the camp, providing perfect cover for anything that might want to approach unseen. Katie tried once more to voice her concerns. Captain, this location makes us vulnerable. We should move to higher ground, away from the natural travel routes. Captain Zextar looked around the camp with satisfaction. This position is perfect. Close to water, level ground for our equipment, and protected from wind by the ridges. Your human instincts for danger are unnecessary here. Solana was setting up the communications array. Our sensors show no dangerous life forms within 50 kilometers. Your worries are based on experiences from your primitive homeworld. Security Chief Bractor was installing the perimeter defense system. The energy barriers would keep out small animals and insects, but Katie noticed that the generators were placed too far apart. A determined predator could easily slip between them. The perimeter gaps are too wide, she told Bractor. Anything larger than a house cat could get through. The large Vexan warrior laughed. Human girl, I have been setting up military camps for 30 years. There are no large predators on this world. The gaps are sized correctly for the threats that exist here. Katie was assigned to catalog mineral samples while the real research began. She worked at a folding table on the edge of camp, organizing rock specimens and entering data into a portable computer. It was boring work that kept her away from the important activities, but the position gave her a good view of the surrounding area. As the day went on, she began to notice things that the advanced sensors had missed: broken branches at the same height, as if something large had pushed through the underbrush. Scratch marks on tree trunks that were too high and too deep to have been made by small animals. Strange bird calls that sounded more like signals than natural sounds. When evening came, the team gathered around a central fire to eat and discuss their findings. Dr. Velthos was excited about soil samples that showed unusual mineral compositions. Zelana had detected energy readings that might indicate rare crystal formations underground. Katie listened to their talk while she prepared her own evening meal. She had brought human military rations that could be eaten cold if necessary. The aliens were cooking fresh food over the fire, filling the air with smells that would carry for kilometers. "We should not be cooking hot meals," Katie said quietly. "The smell will attract predators." Dr. Velthos looked at her with amusement. "What predators? Our scans detected no carnivorous species larger than insects. Scans can be wrong. Predators learn to hide from detection. On the mining stations, we always ate cold rations in unknown territory until we were sure the area was safe." Zelana shook her elegant head. "Your people lived in constant fear because your technology was inadequate. Our sensors can detect the heat signature of any creature larger than a mouse from 50 kilometers away." Captain Zextar stood up and looked directly at Katie. "Human, your constant warnings are becoming tiresome. We are not on your crude mining stations. We are a scientific expedition with advanced technology and proper training. I order you to stop filling the air with your paranoid concerns." Katie felt her face grow hot, but she nodded and returned to her work. She had tried to warn them. If they would not listen, she would have to take care of herself. After the others went to sleep, Katie quietly moved her bedroll to a position against the largest tree near the camp's edge. She used local materials to build a small shelter that would hide her heat signature and muffle any sounds she might make. Then she set up her own early warning system using pieces of metal from her kit, arranged so that anything approaching would make noise. She also prepared an emergency pack with water, rations, and basic medical supplies. Her uncle had taught her that in dangerous territory you always slept ready to run. The night was full of sounds. Most of them were probably harmless, but Katie's trained ear picked out calls and movements that did not seem natural. Something large was moving through the forest, staying just beyond the range of the camp's sensors. Twice during the night, Katie heard sounds that made her grip the knife her uncle had given her, heavy footsteps moving carefully through undergrowth, the snap of a branch under significant weight, a low rumbling sound that might have been breathing. Each time she considered waking the others. Each time she decided against it. They had made it clear that they thought her fears were unreasonable. They would only be angry at being disturbed for what they would consider false alarms. As dawn approached, Katie finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Whatever was out there seemed to be staying away from the camp for now. Maybe the perimeter defenses were working better than she had expected, but as the first light of morning filtered through the trees, Katie saw something that made her blood run cold. In the soft earth near the river, just beyond the perimeter barriers, were footprints. They were circular, about the size of dinner plates, with marks where claws had pressed into the ground. The prints were fresh, made sometime during the night. And there were dozens of them, arranged in patterns that suggested coordinated movement. Whatever had made them was not only large and dangerous, but intelligent enough to scout their defenses without triggering alarms. Katie stared at the tracks and realized that the creatures Dr. Velthos had dismissed as harmless rabbits were something else entirely, something that hunted in groups and planned their attacks, something that was coming back. Katie's improvised alarm system woke her 2 hours before dawn. Small pieces of metal clinked together in a pattern that meant something large was moving through the trees toward their camp. She lay still in her shelter and listened to the sounds of the forest. The normal night sounds had stopped. No insects, no bird calls, no rustling of small animals in the undergrowth. The silence was complete except for the careful footsteps moving closer to their position. Katie counted at least 6 separate sets of footsteps, each one moving with deliberate care. Whatever was approaching knew how to hunt as a team. They were surrounding the camp, cutting off escape routes before moving in for the attack. She looked toward the main camp where her crewmates slept in their standard-issue shelters. Captain Zexitar was snoring loudly. Dr. Velthos had his datapad propped against his pillow, still reading research notes. Zalana's shelter glowed softly from the charging station for her engineering tools. Security Chief Bractor was supposed to be on watch, but Katie could see him sitting by the dying fire, looking at his scanner instead of watching the tree line. Katie reached for her emergency pack and quietly prepared to move. She had two choices: wake the others and try to convince them of the danger, or stay hidden and hope the creatures would leave them alone. Neither option seemed likely to work. The decision was taken away from her when the attack began. The first creature burst from the tree line like a living shadow. It was nothing like the harmless herbivores the sensors had detected. 8 feet long and covered in dark fur that seemed to absorb light, it moved on 6 powerful legs that ended in claws the size of kitchen knives. Its head was massive, with jaws that could crush metal and eyes that reflected the dying firelight like red stars. Security Chief Bractor had time to raise his weapon before the creature was on him. His energy rifle fired once, the beam striking the creature's hide and doing nothing. The creature's natural armor absorbed the energy like it was nothing more than flashlight. Bractor's scream woke the rest of the camp. More creatures poured from the forest, at least a dozen of them moving with coordinated precision. They had planned this attack, using pack tactics that would have impressed human military commanders. Captain Zextar rolled from his shelter and reached for his sidearm. A creature landed on him before he could draw it, claws raking across his scaled chest and leaving deep wounds. The captain's military training took over and he fought back with hands and teeth, but he was overmatched by an opponent that outweighed him by 300 pounds. Dr. Velthos simply froze. His brilliant mind, capable of solving complex scientific problems, could not process the reality of immediate physical danger. He stood in the center of camp while chaos erupted around him, his large eyes wide with shock and terror. Zalana was trapped inside her shelter when a creature landed on top of it. The reinforced fabric held for a moment, then tore under the assault of claws and teeth. Katie could hear the engineer's panicked cries as she tried to find an escape route. The camp's perimeter defenses were useless. The creatures had studied the energy barriers and learned to leap over them or slip between the gaps that Bractor had insisted were properly sized. Their natural stealth capabilities had hidden them from the advanced sensors until they were ready to attack. Katie watched her crewmates being overwhelmed and made her choice. She could not save everyone, but she might be able to save some of them if she acted fast and used every trick her uncle had taught her. She grabbed a burning branch from the fire and threw it at the nearest creature. The flames startled it for a moment, giving her time to reach Dr. Velthos. She grabbed the frozen scientist by his arm and dragged him toward the tree line. "Move," she shouted at him. "Run toward the river!" The command broke through his panic. Dr. Velthos stumbled after her as she led him away from the main battle. Behind them, Katie could hear Captain Zextar's roars of pain and rage as he continued fighting. Katie pushed Dr. Velthos behind a fallen log near the water's edge.
"Stay down and do not move," she told him.
"I will come back for you." She circled back toward the camp, moving carefully through the undergrowth. The creatures were focused on their main targets and did not notice her approach. Katie had learned long ago that humans' greatest advantage was not strength or technology, but adaptability. She reached Zalana's destroyed shelter and found the engineer cornered against a supply crate. A creature was stalking toward her, taking its time now that its prey was trapped. Katie picked up a heavy rock and threw it as hard as she could at the creature's head. The rock bounced off the creature's skull without causing real damage, but it got the animal's attention. It turned toward Katie with a growl that sounded like grinding metal. Katie was already moving, grabbing a chemical light from her emergency kit and cracking it open. The bright blue light confused the creature's night vision. Katie used the distraction to reach Zalana and pull her away from the wreckage. "Can you run?" she asked the engineer. Zalana nodded, her elegant composure completely gone. Katie led her in a wide circle around the battle, using every piece of cover available. They reached the fallen log where Dr. Velthos was hiding, and Katie pushed Zalana down beside him. "Both of you stay here," Katie said. "I have to help the others." Captain Zextar was still fighting, but he was losing. The creature on top of him had torn through his armor and was going for his throat. Security Chief Bractor was down, his weapon torn from his hands and his left arm hanging at an odd angle. Katie looked around for anything she could use as a weapon. The camp's equipment was scattered and broken, but she spotted a container of industrial solvent that Zalana had been using to clean crystal samples. Katie grabbed it and a handheld torch from the engineering supplies. She approached the creature, attacking Captain Zextar from behind. The solvent was highly flammable, designed for use with heat-resistant materials. Katie poured it over the creature's fur and triggered the torch. The creature screamed and rolled away from Captain Zextar as flames spread across its hide. It thrashed in pain and confusion, crashing into two other creatures and setting them ablaze as well. The rest of the pack scattered, their coordinated attack broken by the unexpected threat of fire. Katie helped Captain Zextar to his feet. He was badly wounded but still conscious. "Can you walk?" she asked. The captain nodded grimly. Together they reached Security Chief Bractor, who was conscious but in shock from his injuries. Katie used her emergency medical supplies to stop his bleeding and fashion a sling for his broken arm. The burning creatures had fled into the forest, and their packmates followed them. The immediate danger was over, but Katie knew it was only temporary. The creatures were intelligent. They would regroup and try again, and next time they would be ready for fire. Katie gathered her scattered crewmates near the river where they would have one direction they could not be attacked from. She used her survival training to treat their wounds and help them deal with their shock. As dawn broke over the forest, the crew of the Starbound Horizon looked at their destroyed camp and realized how close they had come to dying. Their advanced technology had failed them completely. Their superior knowledge had been useless against an enemy they had not even known existed. The only reason any of them were still alive was the human they had dismissed as paranoid and primitive. The Deathworld girl they had ignored had just saved their lives. Katie looked at her injured crewmates huddled by the river and knew their situation was far from over. The pack hunters had retreated, but they were still out there. She could hear them moving through the forest, regrouping and planning their next attack. "We need to get back to the shuttle," Captain Zextar said through gritted teeth. His chest wounds were deep and he was losing blood despite Katie's field bandages. Katie shook her head. "The shuttle is on the other side of the camp. They will be waiting for us there. Those creatures are smart enough to cut off our escape routes." Security Chief Bractor tried to stand up and immediately sat back down, his face pale. "Then we call for emergency pickup. The ship can send another shuttle." "Communications are down," Zalana said quietly. She was holding the remains of their communication array. The equipment was destroyed in the attack. Dr. Velthos was staring at the ruined camp with wide eyes. This should not have happened. Our sensors showed no dangerous life forms. How could we have been so wrong? Katie knelt down and examined the footprints in the mud more carefully. In daylight, she could see details that had been hidden before. The creature's claws were worn smooth in certain places, suggesting they were tool users. The spacing of the prints showed they could move on either 4 or 6 legs, changing their posture to suit different terrain. "They are not just predators," Katie said. "They are evolved hunters with flexible tactics. Your sensors probably detected them, but classified them as smaller animals because they can compress their bodies and change their heat signatures." She pointed to scratch marks on nearby trees. "See these claw marks? They are not random. These are territory markers and communication signs. The creatures have been watching our ship since we arrived. They knew exactly how many of us there were and what our capabilities were before they attacked." Captain Zextar winced as he shifted position. "So what do we do?" "We cannot fight them with conventional weapons, and we cannot reach the shuttle." Katie was quiet for a moment, thinking. Her uncle had taught her that every predator had weaknesses, even the most dangerous ones. The key was understanding their behavior and using it against them. "They hunt in packs, but that also makes them predictable," she said finally. "Pack hunters rely on coordination and communication. If we can disrupt that, we can turn their strength into a weakness." She started gathering materials from the wreckage of their camp. Pieces of metal, chemical containers, electronic components, anything that might be useful. The others watched her work without understanding what she was planning. "First, we need to create confusion," Katie explained as she assembled a crude noisemaker from a datapad and some metal fragments. "Pack hunters rely on sound signals to coordinate their attacks. If we flood the area with false signals, they will not be able to communicate effectively." She showed Dr. Velthos how to activate the device. When I give the signal, turn this on and throw it as far as you can toward the forest. It will make sounds similar to their hunting calls, but wrong enough to confuse them. Next, Katie prepared several containers of the industrial solvent, adding other chemicals from Zelana's supplies to make them more volatile. She created improvised fuses using wire from damaged equipment. Fire is still our best weapon against them, she told the others, but we need to use it intelligently. Random flames will just make them angry. Directed fire can create barriers and control their movement. Zelana watched Katie work with growing amazement. You are creating weapons from laboratory supplies. How do you know these combinations will work? Katie smiled grimly. Growing up on mining stations, you learn to make useful things from whatever you have available. When your life depends on recycled air and improvised repairs, you get creative fast. She assigned each crew member a specific task. Captain Zextar, despite his injuries, would provide covering fire with his sidearm if needed. Security Chief Bractor would help carry supplies despite his broken arm. Dr. Velthos would handle the electronic distractions. Zelana would manage the improvised explosive devices. The plan is simple, Katie explained. We create a corridor of confusion and fire that leads from here to the shuttle. We move fast and do not stop for anything. If someone falls behind, the others keep going. The shuttle is our only way off this planet. As if responding to her words, sounds came from the forest that proved the creatures were moving into position for another attack. This time they were being more careful, staying beyond the range where fire could reach them easily. Katie listened to their calls and nodded. They are learning. This attack will be different. They will try to separate us and pick us off one by one. She picked up her improvised weapons and looked at each of her crewmates. Remember, these creatures are dangerous, but they are still animals. They think like predators, which means they can be fooled by the right tactics. Stay together, follow my lead, and we will make it to the shuttle. The attack began with a probe from the forest edge. A single creature showed itself briefly, testing their reactions. Katie threw one of her firebombs at it, not trying to hit the animal, but creating a wall of flames between them and the forest. The creature retreated, but Katie knew more were coming. She activated her noisemaker and threw it toward a different section of forest. The device began broadcasting confused hunting calls that made the creatures hesitate and look around for packmates that were not there. Now, we move, Katie said. She led them away from the river in a path that angled toward the shuttle but kept them away from the main forest where most of the pack was waiting. When creatures appeared on their flanks, Katie used her improvised weapons to create barriers of fire that forced the animals to retreat or find other routes. Dr. Velthos threw his noisemaker device when 3 creatures tried to surround them from the left. The electronic calls confused the animals long enough for the group to slip past them. Zelana proved surprisingly effective with the improvised explosives, timing their detonation to create walls of flame exactly where Katie told her to place them. Her engineer's precision turned crude bombs into surgical tools. Even Security Chief Bractor contributed, using his military experience to spot ambush positions and warn the others where attacks might come from. Captain Zextar stayed in the center of the group, conserving his strength but ready to fight if needed. Despite his wounds, his presence gave the others confidence that they could survive this. Katie moved them through the forest like a chess master, always staying 2 moves ahead of their pursuers. When the creatures tried to drive them toward a cliff, she led them through a narrow ravine instead. When the pack split up to flank them, she used fire to force them back together where they got in each other's way. The shuttle appeared through the trees, its metal hull gleaming in the morning sunlight. But between them and safety was the largest creature Katie had seen yet, clearly the pack leader. It stood directly in front of the shuttle's entrance, daring them to approach. Katie looked at the creature and smiled. She had been saving her best surprise for last. She pulled out a military flare from her emergency kit, something her uncle had given her years ago. The flare burned at over 3,000 degrees, hot enough to cut through metal. When I light this, she told the others, run for the shuttle as fast as you can. Do not look back, do not try to help me. Just get inside and start the engines. Katie ignited the flare and walked straight toward the pack leader. The creature's confidence wavered when it saw the impossibly bright flame in her hands. It had learned to fear fire, but this was like holding a piece of the sun. The pack leader backed away, and Katie pressed her advantage. She threw the flare directly at the creature's feet, creating an explosion of light and heat that sent it fleeing into the forest. Behind Katie, her crewmates reached the shuttle safely. As she ran to join them, she could hear the pack calling to each other in the distance. They were regrouping again, but it did not matter now. The shuttle's engines roared to life as Katie dove through the entrance. Security Chief Bractor sealed the door behind her, while Captain Zexistar took the pilot's seat despite his injuries. As they lifted off from the planet's surface, Katie looked down at the forest where the creatures were still hunting for prey that was no longer there. She had beaten them not through superior strength or technology, but by understanding their nature and using their own instincts against them. The Deathworld girl had proven that sometimes the most primitive tactics were the most effective ones. The medical bay of the starbound horizon was quiet, except for the soft humming of healing equipment. Captain Zexstar lay on a biobed, while automated systems repaired the damage to his chest. The wounds were deep, but the ship's advanced medical technology would have him fully healed within a few days. Katie sat in a chair beside his bed, updating the mission report on a datapad. Her fingers moved slowly across the screen as she tried to find words to describe what had happened on the planet's surface. "You saved our lives," Captain Zexstar said quietly. His voice was weaker than usual, but his yellow eyes were alert and focused. "All of us. We would have died down there if not for you." Katie looked up from the datapad. "I just did what anyone would have done in that situation." The captain made a sound that might have been laughter, though it turned into a cough halfway through. "No, human Katie. What you did was something none of us could have done. We had superior weapons, advanced sensors, and years of training. None of it mattered when we faced a real threat." Dr. Velthos entered the medical bay carrying a stack of data chips. His large eyes looked tired, and his usually perfect posture was slightly slumped. He had been reviewing sensor logs and planetary surveys for the past 6 hours, trying to understand how their equipment had failed so completely. "I have finished my analysis," Dr. Velthos said, setting the data chips on a nearby table. "The creatures we encountered were indeed detected by our sensors. However, our computer systems classified them as harmless based on incomplete behavioral data." He activated a holographic display that showed the pack hunters as they really were. In the 3-dimensional image, Katie could see the full extent of their adaptive capabilities. They could compress their bodies to appear smaller, alter their heat signatures to mimic different types of animals, and coordinate their movements to avoid detection patterns that most sensors were designed to recognize. "They are not just predators," Dr. Velthos continued. "They are evolved specifically to hunt technologically advanced species. Their natural stealth capabilities have developed in response to encounters with spacefaring civilizations. In essence, they have learned to hunt us." Captain Zexstar absorbed this information with visible discomfort. "How many ships have we lost to creatures like these? How many research teams have disappeared because we trusted our technology more than our instincts?" Zalana entered the medical bay at that moment, carrying a portable engineering scanner. She had been examining the damaged equipment from their base camp, trying to understand why their defenses had been so ineffective. "The perimeter barriers were functioning perfectly," she reported. "The creatures simply learned to avoid them. Our sensors detected their presence multiple times, but the computer dismissed the readings as background noise or small animals." She looked directly at Katie. "You saw what our instruments missed. You recognized the signs that our databases said were unimportant. How did you know?" Katie set down the datapad and considered her answer carefully. "On the mining stations where I grew up, we learned to pay attention to details that did not fit normal patterns. When you live in dangerous places, small things that seem wrong usually mean big trouble is coming." Security Chief Bractor limped into the medical bay, his arm in a regeneration sleeve that was slowly repairing his broken bones. Despite his injuries, he had insisted on completing a full security review of the mission. "I have been a warrior for 30 years, he said, his voice heavy with shame. "I have fought in 12 major campaigns and countless smaller battles, but I was completely unprepared for what happened on that planet. My training, my experience, my weapons, all useless." He looked at Katie with something that might have been respect. "You fought like no warrior I have ever seen. Not with strength or superior firepower, but with intelligence and adaptation. You turned their own tactics against them." Katie felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I just used what my uncle taught me. He always said that the most dangerous enemy is the one who can learn and change. You have to be ready to change faster than they can." Dr. Velthos was studying the holographic display with renewed interest. Your uncle sounds like a wise individual. What other tactical principles did he teach you? Over the next several hours, Katie found herself explaining concepts that seemed obvious to her, but were completely foreign to her crewmates. The importance of redundant systems and backup plans, the value of simple, reliable equipment over complex technology, the necessity of understanding your environment before committing to any course of action. Captain Zextar listened to everything with growing amazement. "These are not primitive concepts," he said finally. "They are sophisticated survival strategies that we have forgotten in our pursuit of technological advancement." The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's communication system. A message had arrived from Galactic Command, requesting a full report on their mission to Kepler 442c. Katie started to leave so the senior officers could discuss their response privately, but Captain Zextar stopped her. "Stay," he said. "Your input will be valuable for our report." As they worked together to compile their findings, Katie noticed a change in how her crewmates treated her. Dr. Velthos asked for her opinion on sensor modifications that might detect camouflaged predators. Salana wanted to know about human engineering techniques that prioritized reliability over efficiency. Security Chief Bractor requested training in human tactical methods. When they finished the report, Captain Zextar made an announcement that surprised everyone. Effective immediately, Katie Morgan is promoted to the position of Chief Survival Officer. This is a new position created specifically to address the gaps in our knowledge that nearly cost us our lives. Katie stared at him in shock. "Sir, I do not have the training or qualifications for an officer position." "You have the only qualifications that matter," the captain replied. "You kept us alive when everything else failed. Your knowledge and instincts are exactly what this ship needs." Dr. Velthos nodded in agreement. "Human survival strategies should be studied and integrated into all galactic survey protocols. What happened to us will happen to other crews unless we learn from our mistakes." Salana was already making notes on her datapad. "I want to redesign our emergency systems based on human redundancy principles. Simple, reliable backups that will function even when primary systems fail." Security Chief Bractor stood as straight as his injuries allowed. "I request permission to train with Chief Morgan in human combat and survival techniques. Our military doctrine needs to incorporate these methods." Over the following weeks, as they traveled to their next assignment, the crew of the Starbound Horizon underwent a transformation. Katie found herself teaching classes on survival techniques, threat assessment, and adaptive tactics. Her former skeptics became her most dedicated students. Dr. Velthos developed new sensor protocols that looked for behavioral patterns rather than just physical signatures. Salana redesigned ship systems to include manual overrides and mechanical backups for every critical function. Security Chief Bractor created training programs that emphasized flexibility and environmental awareness over standard military procedures. Captain Zextar instituted new mission protocols that required thorough environmental assessment and survival planning before any away team deployment. Katie's input became mandatory for all mission planning sessions. The change was not just in procedures and equipment. The crew's attitude toward humans and Deathworld species shifted completely. They began to understand that survival instincts were not primitive paranoia, but sophisticated adaptations to a dangerous universe. When other ships' crews heard about their experience, many requested transfers to serve under Katie's guidance. The Deathworld girl who had once been dismissed as a primitive became one of the most sought-after survival experts in the Galactic Survey. Katie stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars as the ship traveled through hyperspace toward their next mission. Captain Zextar joined her at the window. "Do you regret leaving Earth?" he asked. Katie considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally. "Earth taught me how to survive, but out here I can help others learn the same lessons. Maybe that will save some lives." The captain nodded. "Your people have given the galaxy a great gift. You have reminded us that intelligence is not just about technology and knowledge. True intelligence is about adaptation and survival." As Katie watched the stars stream past, she thought about her uncle and the lessons he had taught her in the harsh environment of the mining stations. He had always said that the universe was full of dangers, but also full of opportunities for those brave enough to face them. The Deathworld girl had found her place among the stars, not as a primitive curiosity, but as a teacher and protector. She had proven that sometimes the most valuable knowledge came not from advanced civilizations, but from those who had learned to survive against impossible odds. The crew that had once ignored her warnings now listened to every word she said. They had learned the hard way that in a universe full of threats, having a human watching your back was not just an advantage. It was the difference between life and death.